Hello everyone, I'm MrEliMac and welcome back to Pitch This here on the MrEliMac channel. This is the show where I pitch a movie that I would like to see get made or a movie that I would like to make because there is a high likelihood that I will never be able to write any of these movies. And I just thought it would be a great idea to share all of these ideas with you. But before we get into the idea, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps this video get out to more people, and I'd love for this video to find people and grow the fan base. Also, don't forget to hit the notification bell. That way you can be notified whenever a new video like this goes live. And we are in the end game. That is right. We are in the final entry of the Five Nights at Freddy's film franchise. And it's slightly bittersweet knowing that everything is ending here. Like, this is the final movie and everything is ending. And, you know, all good things must come to an end. You know, it's bittersweet that it's ending, but we have to end it eventually. And this is the movie that's going to end it. The 9th movie in the franchise, sort of like Star Wars, if you think about it. And so, this is the movie that's going to try to wrap things up for the entire franchise. You know, wrap up William Afton, wrap up Elizabeth Afton, wrap up Mike Schmidt, you know, just try to wrap things up while also wrapping up Vanessa's story and, you know, getting all of it together in this movie. So, here's the film pitch for Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach. But also, as I've said before many times, some elements of this film or of this pitch will be inspired by the Game Theorists videos by Matt Pat and the Game Theorist. Except this one probably less so because I'm not a big fan of the Gregory is a robot theory, so you won't be hearing that in this pitch. But nonetheless, because this entire franchise has sort of been based around those theories, I'd like to thank Matt Pat and his crew for creating such a great foundation and sort of a great sort of putty of sorts for me to take pieces of that putty out so that I can make my own movie pitch from that. I know, weird analogy, but it's an analogy nonetheless. Also, I'd like to thank Scott Cawthon for him creating this franchise in general, because he truly made the foundation which allows people like me to build stories around. So again, I'd like to thank Matt Pat and Scott Cawthon. And so the movie starts like any other night at the Freddy Fazbear's Mega Pizzaplex. The band of Glam Rock Freddy, Montgomery Gator, Roxanne Wolf, and Glam Rock Chica get together on stage and they get ready to perform for the audience of children and parents in attendance. And there is a security guard, Vanessa, standing in the back, keeping an eye on all the children and making sure that everything is going according to plan. And over the speakers, you hear a voice ring out and announce that it's time to rock with the Glam Rock crew. And the crowd cheers as the stage rises up and the curtains open and you see the newly crafted animatronics start to play their song and they start to rock out. Unfortunately, Glam Rock Freddy begins to malfunction. His head starts to twitch and everyone starts to look around the room confused, and then Vanessa, she just smirks and walks away from the main stage area. And Freddy, he fully glitches out and he falls onto the floor. And the crowd starts to murmur to themselves as slowly we pan back away from the crowd to the main entrance where we see the logo Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach appear on the screen. And after we get that pan back, we come back to Freddy waking up in the dressing room and feeling something inside of him. He starts questioning that feeling and he knocks on his chest a little bit and then he opens it to reveal a little boy falling out of him. The boy coughs as he picks himself off of the ground. And Freddy looks at the boy in shock and asks who he is. And the boy says that his name is Gregory and that he needed to find a place to hide. And the two have a quick exchange before Gregory hears a voice in the hall. And he quickly runs and hides behind a couch. And outside the window, Freddy sees Vanessa walking around with her flashlight, and he hears her mumbling to herself about a boy. And once she's gone, Freddy looks at Gregory and asks if she was talking about him. And Gregory just nods, and he tells Freddy that he's here for a reason. He tells Freddy that there's something wrong here. And Gregory mentioned that he has an uncle that used to talk about scary stories at Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. And he later explains that he's been coming to the Pizzaplex every day since it opened to find out if there is anything mysterious going on. And Freddy tells Gregory that he needs to leave before the gate officially locks because it's almost time to close. And Freddy tries to open the door to his dressing room, but it's locked. And the moment he notices that it's locked, Gregory says that he's got it, and he enters a vent, and after a few minutes, Gregory exits the vent and notices that he needs an entry pass to open the door. And so he looks around the area, and he just notices an entry pass next to Freddy's door, and he doesn't question it. He's like, oh, there's a pass. And he grabs it, and he opens the door. And Freddy tells Gregory that he needs to get inside of his stomach catch. He needs to get in here, but Gregory tries to negotiate, but Freddy tells Gregory no, that he needs to leave. And Gregory just, he sighs and he agrees. And so he enters the stomach hatch, and Freddy walks towards the entrance of the Pizzaplex. And after a few minutes of walking, Freddy mentions how Gregory feels broken and how there seems like there is something wrong with him. And Gregory tells him just to ignore that, but Freddy insists that on taking him to the first aid area. And so Freddy walks all the way there, and once he's there, Gregory complains, and he goes into the first aid stand because it's like a curtain. He walks in, and so he's looking through the first aid, and he puts a Band-Aid on his chin because he notices there's a cut on his chin. So he puts a Band-Aid on, but then he hears Vanessa walking up to Freddy, and he quickly closes the curtain and just peeks around, hiding. And Vanessa and Freddy have a quick conversation about how Freddy is operating now and that he needs to notify her if he sees a little boy. And Freddy agrees, and after he agrees, she walks away. And once he notices that it's safe, Gregory exits the area and tells Freddy that he needs to hide. And Freddy tells Gregory that he'll keep him safe and tells Gregory that it's time to go. And so the two make their way through the utility tunnels after Gregory gets inside of the stomach hatch. And as they get close to the entrance, Freddy starts to power down, and he ejects Gregory and tells him that he wasn't fully recharged by the time that he discovered Gregory. And he hands Gregory a Fazwatch and tells him that he'll direct him toward the entrance if he gets in trouble. So Gregory isn't 100% sure about this, but he leaves anyway with the Fazwatch. And as he makes his way through alone, he notices Glam Rock Chica walking around in a room. And he hides, trying to avoid her, and even causes a distraction to get her to go that way. And he's able to avoid her, luckily, and he starts making his way through multiple different rooms until he gets to an area where there are pipes. And he walks around the pipes, and he walks past a gate. But once he walks past the gate, he hears a voice saying, "There you are." He turns around and he sees Montgomery Gator busting through the gates. And the moment he sees that, Gregory starts running as fast as he can. And as he's running, he's starting to see all the other animatronics pop up. He sees Roxanne Wolf coming by, and he saying, "Oh, I see you." And he sees the Glam Rock Chica behind him, and she's telling him, "Let me bring you to your parents." And he's running as fast as he can, running faster and faster, trying to avoid all the obstacles. Like if he sees a bench, he jumps over it. If he sees a bunch of barrels, he pushes them down to try to slow them down. And as he does that, he soon reaches a security room, and he closes the door behind him. And he tries to catch his breath as Freddy contacts him through the watch. And Freddy gives him access to the security cameras, and he helps Gregory safely get out of the room. And when Gregory escapes, he sees the entrance to the Pizzaplex, and he runs as fast as he can, only for the nighttime protocols to initiate full lockdown mode, locking Gregory inside of the building. And Freddy tells Gregory that this isn't good and that he'll be stuck in the Pizzaplex until 6 a.m. But Gregory says that it's fine, that now he needs to find out if there's anything really going wrong in the Pizzaplex. But Freddy, again, still tries to convince him to just find a place and hide, but Gregory says no, that he needs to find out if he came back. And Freddy asks, who? Who came back? And Gregory just replies by saying, "The Purple Man." And after he says that, we cut to an apartment. and it's clean and organized. It's sort of what you would expect from a person that is fully put together in life. And the phone rings, and a man walks over to it. The man answers it, but can't say the word, a distorted voice says, "Hello, Mike." The man turns around to the camera, and it's revealed to be Mike Schmidt. Mike looks up, recognizing the voice. And Mike just says, "Afton?" William Afton tells Mike that he should hurry to the Pizzaplex. There's a child that's going to need his help, or Afton's going to find him first. Then the line is cut, and Mike looks at the phone. Many emotions run through his head, but he quickly grabs a jacket and leaves the apartment. Now back at the Pizzaplex, Gregory makes his way through the entry gate and into the customer service with Freddy's help. And then he finds a Mr. Hippo magnet after going through the customer service, and Gregory places it in his pocket, but is annoyed that he has it anyway. And after avoiding some security bots, he's able to make it to another location close by to find the entry pass distributor. He places his entry pass inside, but the machine eats the pass. And Gregory, after a while, thinks of a solution and places the magnet on the machine to get a daycare entry pass. Freddy mentions how this is great and that he'll meet Gregory there. And so Gregory takes the daycare pass and he makes his way to the daycare, avoiding Chica. Gregory enters the daycare and he sees a large statue of two different animatronics. He walks by it as Freddy tells him that he's having some trouble getting in and that he's going to be a little late. And so Gregory follows the directions that Freddy has given him and looks for a security desk. But as he's trying to find a security desk in the area that he is, he actually trips and he falls down a slide towards the actual daycare area. And he walks through the ball pit and he looks up at a spotlighted area. And he sees an animatronic in yellow with a sun face. And he asks Freddy who that is, and Freddy tells him that it's the daycare attendant. And so the daycare attendant jumps from the area that he was into the ball pit. And Gregory tries to avoid the daycare attendant, but it catches him and tries to talk to him. And the daycare attendant is sort of like talking really fast and how he's excited that someone is staying out late and maybe it's going to be a slumber party and they can have so much fun, all the fun, like everything. Like the daycare attendant is going 100 miles an hour. But then as Gregory is trying to avoid it, he accidentally knocks into some stuff, causing multiple things to fall over, causing the daycare attendant to focus all of its attention on the stuff and being like, "Oh no, what was the top? What was the bottom? I don't know what any of this was. I don't know. Oh, goodness me." And so Gregory looks over and he sees the security desk that Freddy was talking about. And so he goes to the desk and looks for the switch that Freddy had mentioned. And the daycare attendant notices Gregory at the desk and tries to tell him that, "Hey, that area is off limits. You don't have to be over there. Like, come on, we can have so much more fun over here. Like, you stay over here." And so Gregory looks over and he notices a flashlight. And just in case, he grabs the flashlight. And he goes back to the switch and he flips it to get the security card. But then once he flips it, all the lights go off. And the daycare attendant starts getting upset. And he starts screaming at him like, no, you weren't supposed to do that. You weren't supposed to do that. Oh, no, you're in so much trouble now. And he starts transforming into a moon version of the daycare attendant. And so the daycare attendant disappears in the dark. And Freddy tells Gregory to quickly turn the lights back on and that they're all in the play structures, like the different breakers are in the play structure, that he needs to turn on the lights. And so Gregory runs around trying to avoid the daycare attendant, and he's able to turn all the lights back on, avoiding the moon version of the daycare attendant. And after trying to just catch his breath after all of that, the sun daycare attendant grabs him and calls him a rule breaker and starts getting upset at him, and he bans him from the daycare. And then once he drops him off out of the daycare attendant alerts all the animatronics in the room and says, "Security, security, security," and he closes the door. And Gregory looks over. He sees Chica, Monty, Roxy, and they're all moving towards him. And Gregory starts running away as fast as he can, but then he is grabbed up. He's picked up, he's grabbed, and he looks up. He sees that it's Freddy, and Freddy, as fast as he can, opens his stomach hatch, puts Gregory in, closes it, and turns around. And that shows all the other animatronics have stopped. And they all begin to walk away, trying to look for Gregory. And Gregory begins to catch his breath, and Freddy asks him if he's alright. And Gregory says that he's okay. And then suddenly, the lights go out again. All the lights in the building go out. And Freddy says that they need to get to a recharge station, that all the power in the building has been diverted to the recharge station, and that they need to get to it so that the daycare attendant doesn't find them. And Gregory starts questioning why it would roam around, why it's allowed to roam, and Freddy quickly tells him that once all the lights go out, the daycare attendant gets to be let out. And so Freddy quickly avoids the obstacles around him and reaches a recharge station. He enters and waits for the lights to come back on. And then suddenly, Freddy and Gregory notice a woman in a bunny suit skipping past them. And Gregory asks who that was, but Freddy glitches before he can answer. His head's twitching. He's like doing something like that, and he starts saying a name like Eliza. And Gregory says Freddy's name, and then Freddy gets back to normal. And Gregory asks Freddy, did they see that person? And Freddy asks, who? And then again, Gregory asks, wait, you didn't see who that was? And Freddy says, who's who? Then after that question is stated, we cut back to Mike driving down the road. And he starts thinking about what happened in the first 3 movies. And he remembers all the pain that he went through, all the struggles, all of the pain of trying to forget what happened to him, and how he thought he was rid of Afton, but now he has to make sure that Afton stays gone. And then Mike continues to drive, focused on the task at hand. Now back at the Pizzaplex, Gregory and Freddy exit the recharging station, and Freddy mentions how there are 2 exits for Gregory. However, Gregory still refuses to leave. He mentions to Freddy that there was a dancing bunny lady right in front of them, but Freddy says that he didn't see her. Gregory even mentions that all of the animatronics are acting weird, like they're being controlled to get him. But Freddy mentions that he's not trying to get him, and that he just wants to help him get out safely. And Gregory mentions that he appreciates it, but he needs to solve what's going on. And Freddy sighs and says that the security pass will lead Gregory to the main atrium. He later tells Gregory that if he really wants to solve whatever is happening, he'll need a map to navigate the Pizzaplex. And so Freddy and Gregory walk towards the elevator to the main atrium. Freddy tells Gregory that the greeter will have a map. And the moment the elevator doors open, the greeter robot scares Gregory and gives him a map. And Gregory holds back a scream as Freddy places Gregory into the stomach hatch. Freddy mentions to Gregory that there may be some clues to what is happening to the animatronics in the loading dock. And as they get closer to a vent that leads to the loading dock, Gregory exits Freddy and tells him that he'll be right back. Freddy stands guard as Gregory continues through the vent. Halfway through, Gregory spots a small Music Man animatronic, probably like this big. And Gregory sighs and rolls his eyes, but then turns around and he starts crawling as fast as he can to escape the animatronic. And luckily, he is just fast enough to escape. And shortly after, he hears Chica close by and runs away from her, making it to a security office. Freddy is able to assist Gregory by telling him to make a pizza for Chica via the robots in the kitchen. And after quickly making a pizza, Chica leaves and goes to eat the pizza. And Gregory chuckles at how he was able to save himself and started sneaking toward the loading dock. And he looks around and he only finds an exit. And Gregory gets upset with Freddy for trying to get him to leave. But Freddy tells him, like, look, you need to be safe, and the only way that's safe is if you leave through the loading dock. And Gregory tells him, no, I need to solve the problem. So Gregory leaves the loading dock and tries to get back to Freddy. But then he is stopped by Greeterbot again. And Gregory's a little, like, pushed back and says, I hate these things. But then the Greeterbot gets pushed aside, and Gregory is stopped by Vanessa. And so we cut back to Mike as he exits his car and he looks at the locked building. He looks at the locked Pizzaplex. He looks around the front of the building trying to find a way in, but he hears a voice say his name. He looks around, but he doesn't see anyone. He turns back to the building and he sees the face of the bunny lady. He backs away, having a guess of what that is. The bunny lady waves and dances off. He runs to the window and tries to break it, but it doesn't break. He feels the ground rumble under him. He looks back at the building, not knowing what's going to happen next. And so we cut back to Gregory in a security office. He tries to kick down the door, but it doesn't budge. He tries to contact Freddy, but he notices that he doesn't have his Fazwatch. Then suddenly, Vanessa's face appears on the TV screens. And Vanessa tells him that he's going to wait there until his parents or the police arrive. And then shortly after she finishes, the bunny lady's face appears. And she greets herself as Vanny and asks Gregory if he's having fun yet. And then the TV's cut off. And so Gregory starts searching the room and he finds a screwdriver and his Fazwatch. He quickly puts the Fazwatch back on as he notices a vent, and he walks over and he starts opening the vent with the screwdriver. Halfway through, however, he looks out the window to the room and he sees Vanny skipping toward the door. And he works faster and faster, and once he gets the door or the screen to the vent open, he enters the vent and he closes it, trying to make sure that Vanny doesn't see. And after a few seconds, he checks the room and sees that she didn't even enter. He sits back for a few minutes and tries to relax. And then he turns to see Vanny skipping on the other side of the vent. And Gregory tries to crawl back and catch his breath. Then once he does, he runs as fast as he can to the elevator and gets back to the main atrium. And the entire time, he just hears Vanny saying, "Are you having fun yet? Oh, are you having fun yet?" Then once he gets into the elevator, Freddy is able to get in contact with Gregory, but it's staticky. He tells Gregory to get to Roxy's Raceway, while he'll be behind a fence. Gregory agrees and makes his way to Roxy's Raceway. And after avoiding security bots and Roxy, Gregory gets over the fence and sees Freddy on the ground. Gregory asks Freddy what's wrong with him, and Freddy tells Gregory that he missed his hourly recharge trying to find him. And Freddy says that he needs to make it to parts and services. He hands Gregory a backstage pass and tells him where to go. And then after that, Freddy enters rest mode, and Gregory leaves with the knowledge of where to go. And once Gregory reaches a room that could lead to parts and services, he presses a button that gives him another badge. And Freddy appears on the monitor telling Gregory that he reset his system. And Freddy tells him he's on the way in to be safe. And after surviving some close encounters with Roxy and Monty, Freddy finally appears at the door. And before Gregory opens the door, Vanny appears on the screen, telling him that she's going to find him. And Gregory quickly opens the door and lets Freddy in. And once Freddy's inside of the hallway, right outside, Gregory exits through a vent to safely get back to Freddy. And the two make their way through the hallways and make it to the main stage. Making sure that everything's safe, Gregory hits the button as the stage descends to parts and services. But halfway down, they see the daycare attendant's head, the moon version. And Gregory mentions that they need to hurry to a recharge station, and Freddy tells Gregory to follow him. But Gregory is able to get there faster, and he reaches the recharge station and gets in. And he looks back and tries to get Freddy to hurry, and he tries like, "Hurry, Freddy, hurry!" But suddenly, the door to the recharging station closes, keeping Gregory inside with Freddy on the outside. Freddy places his hand on the station, but the daycare attendant grabs Freddy and drags him away. And Gregory tries to get out, but is forced to stay until the hour is up. Then we cut back to Mike, and he's able to break into the Pizzaplex. He looks around in the front of the building, but he doesn't find anyone. But then suddenly he hears someone. He turns and he sees Vanny standing nearby. Vanny chuckles and skips away from him. Mike tries to chase her, but she's able to capture him in the lost and found room. Vanny chuckles and tells him, like, "It's not your turn yet, Mike Schmidt. It's not your turn yet at all." And she walks away as Mike sits back resigned in the lost and found. And we cut back to Gregory as he is forced to make his way through a warehouse area with multiple endoskeletons. And as he makes his way through, he finds a security badge to help him access parts and service. However, as he makes his way through the warehouse, it's pretty tough as he has to survive multiple endoskeletons coming to life when he's not looking. And once he gets to parts and service, he sees Freddy in a chair with Vanessa in front of him. And once she leaves, Gregory is able to get in and upgrade Freddy. And when Freddy is fixed, the two make it out of parts and services, with Gregory mentioning how they need to fully upgrade Freddy. And Gregory tells Freddy that they need to decommission the other animatronics, but Freddy is against the idea. But Gregory says that this might be the only way to save them. And not just Gregory and Freddy, but the other animatronics as well. And Freddy finally agrees and mentions that they need to start with Chica. And as we get back to Mike, he's able, after forcing the door open again and again, he's able to force his way out of the room, and he runs back to his car. He opens the trunk and checks on if anyone followed him. And then after checking to see that he's alright, he goes back and he pulls out a shotgun and he loads it with different multiple shells. He takes a deep breath, cocks the gun, and closes the trunk. He gets back closer to the building, and then he is hit on the back of the head and falls unconscious. Fanny stands over him, shakes her head. But then we cut back to Gregory, and Freddy leads Gregory to the bowling alley where Freddy gives Gregory a drink mix that will cause Chica to go nuts. And Gregory makes the drink and brings it to the trash compactor that is near the bowling alley. And the entire time, Gregory has been trying to avoid Chica, but then once he's able to get everything set up, he's able to trick Chica and pushes her in to get her crushed in the trash compactor. But her voice box was able to remain fully intact. So Gregory goes in, grabs the voice box, and leaves the trash compactor. What he doesn't see is a mangled up Chica, slowly exiting as well. Later, Freddy mentions that Roxy would be the next best choice to save, and Freddy leads Gregory to Roxy's raceway, and they both create a trap for her. And once she springs the trap, two test carts start going haywire and run into her, stunning her. And with her on the ground, stunned, Gregory walks over to her and takes her eyes and runs away. However, before he is able to get back to Freddy, he has to avoid her without making a lot of racket, as she's able to get up and starts chasing after her, but she's blind the entire time. So now Gregory has the voice box and the eyes. But also during this time, he's able to discover some secrets in the Pizzaplex. In fact, when he was trying to avoid Roxy on the way to Roxy's raceway, Gregory finds himself in a location where there are 5 security bots at a dinner table. He doesn't understand what this is supposed to mean at all, but he keeps a note of it in his head. and he reaches Freddy and he tells him about the table. And Freddy starts twitching again and says the name Evan. Gregory asks him if he's okay, but Freddy acts as if nothing happened. And the final animatronic that they must save or dismantle is Monty. And so Gregory goes to Monty Golf through a maze, and he has to avoid Monty Gator the entire time. And he discovers that he needs to stop Monty by going to the catwalk up near the splash bucket. And once there, Gregory is able to outwit Monty, and he causes the splash bucket to fall onto Monty, causing Monty to fall and break his legs. After all of this, Gregory is able to get Monty's claws and bring them back to Freddy so they can put him back together with all these upgrades and parts and services. And soon, they make it to another recharge station to hide from the daycare attendant. And Gregory sits back and hides, but Freddy says, "No more." And he exits the recharging station and dismantles the daycare attendant. And Gregory asks why Freddy did that, but Freddy simply says that it hurt too many people, too many kids. And Gregory asks who hurt too many people. Freddy turns back and says, "My father." And so we cut back to Mike. And he finds himself in a room secluded from the rest of the Pizzaplex. And he looks around and he sees different places, a bed, different artifacts that seem to belong to Vanny. In fact, he even sees a chair and a TV that looks reminiscent to the chair and the TV from Five Nights at Freddy's sister location. But then he looks around and he sees an arcade machine that says Princess Quest. And he notices a message on it saying, "Help me." And he starts playing the game and he suddenly sees a woman that looks like Vanessa, but he doesn't recognize it as Vanessa. But the audience knows that it's Vanessa. Mike is able to destroy a lot of the darkness around her and save her. And then we see Vanny entering the room, but before she can even get close to Mike, she screams in pain and falls to her knees as Mike runs out of the room with his shotgun. Back with Gregory, Freddy returns, fully recharged, and tells Gregory that they have an hour left. And they need to go to the entrance, but Gregory says that they don't know what's been happening here. But Freddy shouts that he doesn't care, Evan. Gregory asks again, "Who's Evan?" Freddy steps back and he looks around and he says that he doesn't know. And so the two make their way to the main entrance and they meet up with Mike Schmidt. Mike pulls up his shotgun at Freddy, but Gregory stands in front of Freddy and he looks up at Mike and he says, "Uncle Mike?" Mike and Gregory talk about how Gregory is trying to find out who's been manipulating the animatronics. And Gregory even says that Freddy's the only one that hasn't been changed. Suddenly, Mike, Gregory, and Freddy hear Vanny. They turn and see her near the elevators. And she skips off. And Mike tells both Gregory and Freddy to leave. But Gregory says that he's going. And in fact, as Mike tries to stop him, Gregory already is gone. Mike looks over to Freddy and says, "Has this been happening all night?" Freddy says, "Yeah, pretty much." And so the three go together and follow Vanny to an old elevator at Roxy's Raceway. They all go to a secret tunnel under the Pizzaplex. And they see Vanny and they chase after her. And then, as they're chasing after her, they see an old pizzeria that the Pizzaplex was built over. And when they reach it, Freddy grabs his head and he starts to glitch and twitch. And he tells Gregory and Mike to run and that they shouldn't be here. But nonetheless, Gregory runs forward, leaving Mike with Freddy. Suddenly, Freddy is able to recompose himself. He follows Gregory. And Mike just shrugs and follows behind both of them. And all three of them are able to make it through the pizzeria, and they're able to make it past a large blob-like creature with different parts of different animatronics inside of it. But they make it through being very, very quiet. And so they get to the bottom of the area and they reach and see a secret area under all of it. And they look around the room and they see Vanny close by. She chuckles and tells them that we're so glad that you could make it. Mike pulls up his shotgun and asks, who's we? And Vanny presses a button and opens a door. And slowly, footsteps can be heard as a destroyed glam rock Bonnie animatronic walks into the room. Not known as Glam Rock Bonnie anymore, not even looking like Bonnie anymore, but no, it looks like a burn trap. Freddy twitches again and points at burn trap, and Mike slowly lowers the shotgun and says, Afton. Gregory looks up at burn trap and asks if it was William Afton, and burn trap responds with a distorted voice and says, Yes. He points to Vanny and says that you've met my daughter, Elizabeth. She curtsies and chuckles. Mike holds the shotgun back up and tells Gregory to run, but Gregory starts to back up. But Afton says that he shouldn't leave. He's the reason they're all here. One child to kill or save. But Freddy recomposes himself once again, and he steps in front of Gregory. And he says that Afton's not taking him. And he refers to Afton as Dad. Mike looks over confused, but Burntrap laughs and says that he shouldn't be shocked that Michael Afton is back to save the kid. Freddy turns his head and tells Mike and Gregory to run. Mike nods and takes Gregory, but Gregory tries to fight back, but Freddy says that he needs to keep his superstar safe. Mike and Gregory run out of the room and past the blob creature. Afton looks over at Vanny and tells her to get the boy. She nods and chases after them. Afton and Freddy square off. Afton asks if this is really what's going to happen, and Freddy says yes. The two fight each other, with the story of the movie occasionally flashing between them being their animatronic selves and their human selves. Back with Gregory and Mike, the two have made it back to the main Pizzaplex area, but Mike sees the other animatronics following them. He sees Chica running without her mouth. He sees Roxy chasing after them without her eyes, and he sees Monty crawling his way through. And Mike is able to grab Gregory, tosses him near photo booth, and tells him to hide. And Gregory runs as fast as he can into the photo booth, closes the curtain, and hide. Meanwhile, Mike takes his shotgun, cocks it, and takes out all of the animatronics, hitting them in the chest and then in the head, blowing up their endoskeleton, causing them all to either fall down limp or, in the case of Monty, who's already on the ground, just fall limp. But suddenly, he hears a rumbling again. He looks around the floor, then he looks up and he sees a wall burst, destroyed, as he sees a humongous, gigantic Music Man animatronic enter the main stage area. He exhales in anger, like, come on, and he starts to run away from the Music Man as it chases him. Gregory sees what's happening, and he runs towards the turntables on the third floor of the main stage area. And he looks around and he takes the music disc and he places it on the turntable. And he presses play as loud music starts to play. Music Man stops his pursuit of Mike. He looks around and he sees Gregory at the turntables. And he slowly starts to walk towards Gregory as Gregory yells at Mike to trip him up. Mike runs around and he takes some of the security ropes and he starts wrapping it around Music Man's feet. And then as Music Man starts to have one leg up, Mike is able to jump up and just pull with all of his might down, pulling the feet together. And as Music Man starts to reach out, he trips and he falls down, boom, on the ground, causing the ground to rumble again. The Music Man is down for the count. Gregory gets out of the turntable area and runs back to Mike. The two give each other a high five as Vanny stabs Mike in the back, and Mike falls over in pain. Not dead, just in pain. Then Vanny grabs the knife and pulls it out, and she starts walking towards Gregory. And she says that Daddy needs his victim, and that he shouldn't be running away. Then suddenly a voice starts to echo in the room, and it tells Elizabeth that her time is done. But then Mike looks around, recognizing the voice. And then Vanny looks over to the side of Gregory, and she sees the puppet standing next to him. And Vanny tells the puppet that she shouldn't be here. And the puppet simply replies, "Neither should you." And the puppet jumps out at Vanny and flies inside of her body. Vanny drops the knife, and after a few seconds of squirming, Vanny screams out in pain as the puppet pulls and tears the soul of Elizabeth Afton out of the body. The puppet looks at her and says, "Your time is done." She lets her go as the soul of Elizabeth screams out in pain as fire wraps around her as she disappears in flames. The puppet floats towards Mike and helps him up. Mike tries to apologize to it, but the puppet tells him that he doesn't need to. He just needs to help her. Mike looks over and sees Vanny take off her mask to reveal Vanessa. Vanessa looks at Gregory and tells him that she's sorry. She wasn't in control of what she was doing, but Gregory tells her not to apologize. He tells Mike and Vanessa that they need to help Freddy because he can't do this alone. Mike looks at Vanessa and nods. He grabs the shotgun, and the three walk together back to the old pizzeria. And Freddy continues to fight Afton, but Afton is able to get the upper hand as he starts tearing down Freddy. And Afton tells Freddy that he was never strong enough. And he says that at the end of the day, he was always the weaker son, that he never loved Michael, that he never loved him. Mike and Afton looks at his hand and at the claws that he's created for himself. He chuckles and he lifts it up, about to give a final blow to Freddy. But before he can swipe down, boom! Boom! He is shot in the chest, and he falls back to the ground as Mike stands there with a shotgun. Mike walks over and grabs Freddy and pulls him away. But Afton starts to laugh, and he tells them that they can all get away, that they can all escape, but that won't matter. Afton will always be back. Afton will always be here, because he always comes. But before he can finish, the blob bursts into the room and grabs Afton by the leg and by the throat. But when the blob bursts in, it starts to create a fire. The blob pulls Afton close to it, and with the head of Funtime Freddy, the blob stares right into Afton's face, and it says, with multiple voices coming out of it, multiple voices of the many children that William Afton has killed, it says, "Not this time." And the soul of William Afton screams as loud as possible. It is torn from Burntrap's body. And you can see William trying to grab for the body, but the blob continues to grab, as it is the spirit of all the children pulling Afton out of the body. And after William is fully pulled out, Mike and Freddy just stare at the spirit of William Afton. And William looks back at the body and says, "No, no, no," and the blob turns its head back to look at them, and the voices tell him that the deal with the devil has been cancelled. And as that is said, Afton's soul slowly starts to catch fire as the blob lets go, and in excruciating pain, Afton screams as loud as possible as the skin begins to burn from his face. The multiple iterations of the Springtrap suit start to fly off of his skin, melting off of him. Springtrap, Scraptrap, Burntrap, the Golden Bonnie Springlock suit, until it's just his face, and then bones, as he is evaporated from life. And as the Burntrap body falls to the ground around Freddy and Mike starts to rumble again as the two quickly leave. And as Mike and Freddy reach the lobby, Freddy falls to the ground. Again, it continues to rumble around him as Gregory runs and tries to pull Freddy out of the building, but Freddy tells Gregory to detach his head. Gregory asks him what this is going to do, and Freddy says, "Trust me, just detach my head." And so Gregory does so and grabs his head, and he runs out of the building. And Gregory, Vanessa, and Mike fully get out of the Pizzaplex, far away as they possibly can, as the building shakes and starts to collapse and fall down. And as we look inside the pizzeria, we see Chica, Roxy, and Monty fall into a hole. And then we go back to the body of Freddy as it falls down into the hole as well, as everything falls down, creating a sinkhole where the building where Pizzaplex once stood. And everything that was there is gone. But then, as the three are catching their breath, the soul of Michael Afton exits Freddy. And he looks back at them. And he smiles as he floats back to the sky. And as he floats back, the many souls of the children that were inside of the blob also float to the sky. The burden of William Afton truly gone. Weeks later, it is revealed that Freddy Fazbear's Mega Pizzaplex was built on an unstable ground, and that the owners of Fazbear Entertainment refused to acknowledge the unsafetyness of the building. It was also revealed that Fazbear Entertainment, after many catastrophes that struck them, have announced that they will be declaring bankruptcy for all the money that they have lost from the Pizzaplex getting destroyed, and that they will be closing down all operations. Back with Gregory, Mike, and Vanessa, Gregory sits next to a fully charged Freddy Fazbear head on a picnic blanket. Vanessa stands alone, trying to stay away from them. But Mike walks up to her and tells her that the nightmares will go away. It'll take time, but she'll be alright. The best thing that she can do now is to spend time with Gregory and Freddy. Having friends that went through the same trauma will help. Vanessa smiles and nods. She walks over to them. She sits down and enjoys the sunset with them. Mike pulls out a camera and takes a picture of them. And the final frame of the movie before the credits begin to roll is of the photo of Gregory, Freddy, and Vanessa next to each other on a picnic blanket. And that's how I would make Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach. That's it. That is the end of the FNAF film franchise. It's been a long journey, but we were able to do it. I know this is a longer video than usual, but there was a lot of stuff that I needed to get through in this video, and I really wanted to wrap up a lot of plot threads that weren't actually in the game. And so, yeah, that's the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise. I hope you enjoyed the journey that we went on with all of these movies, and who knows, maybe if the right person watches this, like Jason Blum of Blumhouse, I might get a chance to maybe get a story credit, at least. I don't think that's possible, but who knows, maybe some of these movies will actually come into fruition or whatever the word is. But next week, we start out a new journey with a new franchise that begins with an old school comic hero known as the Phantom. But what were your thoughts on the pitch? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Were you indifferent to it? Whatever your thoughts, post them in the comments down below. Also, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. And again, hit the notification bell to be notified whenever a new pitch video goes live. With all that being said, I've been MrEliMac, and I hope you all have a great rest of the day.